Hi guys, we wanted to do something a little different for this squad goals. Instead of a random clip episode, we wanted to talk about Ready or Not in a more roundtable discussion type way. Ready or Not's been out in early access for a few months now, and just before the big new update in June, we wanted to get our thoughts and experiences out and just talk about where we think the game is right now. This took a while to sort out. The damn video is 45 minutes long. But I'm really proud of the fact that we managed to get together, find some time when we were all free, which is becoming more and more difficult, and just have a nice discussion. Didn't descend into too many insults. Was some ranting about Battlefield. That was bound to happen. So yeah, let's get into the video. The first thing we wanted to discuss were the maps available for Ready or Not. So far, there's about 4 fully finished, as well as a couple of test maps where you get the layout without the textures. There's space for more, and of course the modding community has provided a load, but we're only focusing on the ones that have come out with the game. In general, we like what we see, but we did have one major problem that we found with a few of them. That being said, let's see what we had to say.
The maps they've done so far are good, for the most part. I think they're quite good. There are a couple of issues with them though, I think it's worth raising. One, they're all huge, which is it's good because it keeps you dynamic, but they are, the kind of size that a 4-man SWAT team, which is what we play as, would never consider trying to cover on our own. You very commonly will run out of throwables halfway through the map. And I don't think many SWAT teams think, oh, let's probably not flashbang this room so we can save the flashbang for later. So I think more small maps would actually be better. And I actually think the other side of that is because small maps are much quicker to play, you can play them again and again and again in very quick succession to try and get better at them. Whereas the large maps, to play them well, 20, 30, 40 minutes. So by the time you've done it a couple of times, you're like, oh, that's our time done, and that's us. I think overall they're good, and the overall design is good, though.
Mostly agree with what Rowan said about the maps. Like, I feel like the smaller the maps, the quicker you can sort of snap them out. And because they've got that nice... it's almost randomly generated where, like, the positions are and where everything is. That, like, the smaller the maps are, the easier you can kind of do that and learn the map and go, okay, say for example, the gas station, the one with like the diner at the back and everything. Like it's really easy to learn that map, but then every time you play it, it's quite nice to have that like little change. But the bigger maps, I feel like they're kind of overwhelming. Like the one it's like a vineyard or like a giant manor house or something. Like
Cherry Biasa Farm.
Something like that, yeah. I found that was really quite overwhelming, and it was like, oh, okay, room after room after room, and it just kind of gets a bit stale with the bigger maps. Not that they shouldn't do them, but I feel like this game serves itself well with the small, quick kind of, you do this map, you go in, you blow everything up, and then you round up everyone, and then you go again, because you can. Like, it's nice to do that. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how the maps change with the difficulty as well, because we've really only been playing on like a lower difficulty. It'll be interesting to see how they progress when we've got like different types of hostages, or if there's a bomb threat or anything like that.
What they've already said is kind of true to it. So in terms of actual layout, they are the ones that they've fleshed out fully are very, very nice. They're very detailed. They're very authentic. Like, it feels like they've actually sat down and tried to faithfully replicate some of the environments which they've taken you to, which is really nice. Some of the maps, though, as Rowan's already said, do start to get a little bit too large, and that can make it very difficult for a 4-man team to effectively control the areas which they've already been through. If there's too many alleyways and avenues and doors and etc. and lanes basically for the AI to move around in, on the one hand it's quite nice and realistic, but on the other hand it makes it very, very challenging, and it's that fine balance between wanting a challenging experience and it not being to the point of stressful. At the end of the day, it's a video game. You play it to have fun, and it's nice that you sometimes have the option of going to the extreme levels of realism, but sometimes you do just want to fire the game up and just have a gaming experience. But that said, I think even if some of the larger maps, you could segment them down and have small sections out of that map as one of your smaller ones. So for example, the crack house level, where you could quite easily just have the main house, or you could have the fumigation house on the other side of it as a single map for a much smaller scale engagement, which would be quite good. I think as well, long term, it would be really good if they could bring in some other things. So go back to original Siege when that first came out, and you had the plane, you had Air Force One, you had the house. Now the house is a fan favourite with players, partly because it was in the original version of the game, but it was very, very, it fitted with that theme at the time, and I feel like again here it would be perfect. Have the suburban house, have the big double garage on the ground floor, have the giant kitchen, have the greenhouse at the back, have the swimming pool, have the gym, and all the things like that, and go through that, because that'd be quite fun. Have a plane, have have a bunch of small scale kind of environments that you can go through.
This is all coming from the fact that this is still early access. It's a huge pinch of salt we're going to have to take with everything we say. But so far, I think what we've gotten is a brilliant selection and a brilliant taste of what we can expect to see in the last. I think even the crack house level has shown how much versatility these maps have when you use different conditions. So crack house on barricaded suspects is very different to raid. Where you start, it gives you a whole lot of a street essentially to work with. Admittedly, that usually ends up with us being headshotted from 2 miles away. One of the most underrated maps I think we've had so far is I really wish I'd remembered all the proper names, but the high-rise hotel rooms, where you also have to find the long rifle and the AR-15. That design, that compact mixed with long rooms, where you've got good sight lines mixed with very tight corners, it's a great way to challenge even a squad that behaves like one, like we're supposed to. In terms of,
sometimes,
I think one of the weakest ones, I do hate to say it because it got a lot of attention in the trailers, is the port. I think it suffers a lot from the main problems all of them have, where it turns into a labyrinth, especially when you go inside. As you keep going up floors, you start saying, there's no way this place should have this many rooms. It makes very little sense. It's confusing. Going back to Rowan's idea of having a map, even one that kind of gets created as you go through it, so you can at least take note of where you're going. And I think stuff like the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes, where they have a map that clears itself as you go through it. So, and the last thing I want to point out is that, akin to what SWAT 4 did on certain missions, I'm more of a story kind of guy when it comes to video games. Recently I've been liking more single player stuff, but multiplayer when it comes to working as a team, I prefer co-op story. So missions like the Fairfax residence, the serial killer guy, and even the Tyrone building where I had the cult, I kind of love to see more missions like that. There's actual interaction with, just the world events. Like, it's early access. This stuff is probably being planned. And again,
I think they are working on a campaign. I think.
The trailers which suggest that they're going to have one that involves like some of the more darker aspects of what a SWAT team will have to do. Next, we talked about the controls. 3 out of 4 of us are controller-based gamers, which meant going to a mouse and keyboard setup for the first time on a very complicated first-person shooter meant that there was a bit of a learning curve. Let's see what we thought. I am the biggest console retard of this group. By a long shot.
It's true, he is.
Me and first-person controls on PC games go about as well as oil and water. I have gotten a little bit better, annoyingly with 2042, where I was forced to try and figure out how to get it to work, but that's not a great benchmark. So far, what I've found is that the slower pace has made it so I don't suck that much. It's all about being careful. It's about pre-planning. It's all about coordination. It's all about picking your shots properly. I think when we tried raid mode on the crack house, that kind of got where I got most tested because you had to react very quickly. I find it hilarious how I still can't find the sprint button. It should just be as simple as searching the control setups, but I still haven't figured that out. Where I think it's definitely smoother than SWAT 4, and I like the fact that there's a lot more interactivity on screen, so the UI is very good at telling you, you press F now, you'll kick the door. Has meant that we've kicked open doors when we mean to peek them, and then we blow up. Nice quirk, makes for some funny moments, kind of needs to be sorted out, but also kind of needs us to be a bit more deliberate with our movements. So yeah, for me, controls are pretty good as is. It just needs me to stop being such an idiot.
This game's quite unique in that, although it is a first-person shooter, it is not a twitch shooter. It's not a game that is designed to be played fast. So the controls, for what they do, they're pretty good, but they're not necessarily intuitive and they're not necessarily slick. Now, you can remap certain keys, which does make it an easier experience. But something like Call of Duty or Battlefield, there's only so many actions you can do. So the controls tend to be relatively easy and they tend to lend themselves to being done quite quickly. This game is the opposite of that. So it does pay to actually sit down and remap the controls and actually pay attention to them. And the game does reward you when you play it properly. The game, it seems to struggle a little bit when the pace really picks up. But again, it could just be that that just needs me to get more used to it. Controller support might be nice, but again, it might turn out that there's too many controls really for it to work really well on a controller. But that said, there are other games where you've got a myriad of controls that they've managed to map to them, so it might be done. With the door thing, the interactivity, it's nice to know, press F to do this, so and so. But I think what I want is the interactivity sections of the door to be bigger. So, if I want to kick it, make the kick thing, like the trigger zone, I suppose, bigger, and make the peak thing bigger, or give me the option to remap peak and kick to two different keys or something like that. But just generally, I think make them a little bit bigger and a little bit more reliable. I think that's probably the key issue that we've found.
I think out of the four of us, I've probably played more PC than you guys. I'm more used to PC controls. And when you come to these kinds of sims, I guess it's like a realism sim or something like that, they do just have a bunch of keys. If you've ever played Stalker on the PC, like the entire keyboard, there's a button for everything. Everything on the keyboard does something. And it's great because you've got so much flexibility to like do what you want, but you've only got like five fingers. You've only got 5 fingers, and everything you need to do is essentially on the left-hand side of the keyboard. So having stuff at like P or the hashtag is relatively pointless. It's just one of those things that, unfortunately, military sims, realism sims, whatever you want to call them, kind of suffer from, is you've got a lot of options, but, there's only so many keys you can actually use. But the fact that you can rebind keys is... And you can have like multiples of the same one as well. So you've got like two different columns, and you can have like 2 different keys do the same thing. So you can have like P and Q, for example, do the same thing. So generally speaking, for me, the controls are just like every other military sim, where you've got lots and lots of options, but ultimately you're going to find where you can reach and what is important to you, and just rebind them. That's unfortunate. That's a kind of downside of playing on a PC, is that one of the first things you do whenever you load up a PC game is you go to the options. You always go to the options, because you go to the graphics bit and you go, oh, okay, well, for some reason it's put my resolution on potato quality, so I have to change that. Or it's got you or the opposite, it's got it's trying to blow out to 8K and you're like, no, I don't have an 8K monitor. Nobody does. But you can always you have to go into the controls and you go, okay, this does this and this does this. But the more you play this kind of game, the more you find out, actually, I don't need a quick bind for, say for example, in this one, there's a quick bind for the zip ties, the handcuffs. So you don't need it because there's just as soon as you look down at the person, there's the interact prompt and that does it for you. You don't need to have the cuffs out before you do it. So then you start to find out, okay, well, for some reason that's mapped to Q, so I don't need that. I'll change that to lean left, or you might find, okay, I'm using quite a lot of flashbangs as this game demands, so I'll change that to flashbang instead. It sucks that it's one of those things you got to do, but you get used to it with PC games, and the more you play the game, the more you realize, okay, these are the ones that are actually important. I'm just rebinding them.
I naturally tend towards controller. It's always how I've liked to play. And I think, and I love both console and PC, so I can say this with an open heart, that games that are native controls via a controller have better controls than games that are natively keyboard and get ported over, because controllers are intuitive. The PlayStation, no, I'm a PlayStation controller man myself. In fact, I still have my PlayStation controller plugged in from the last game I played on the PC, and Steam obviously has a built-in PlayStation emulator, although it kind of slightly prefers Xbox controllers. The PlayStation controller is incredibly intuitive, and there is no wasted space, and also there's no buttons you can't use easily. The keyboard is the opposite of that. The keyboard is not designed for your hand to sit still. The keyboard was never designed for your hand to sit still on it. Your hand is supposed to move across the keyboard. And so a keyboard is always that's not to say keyboards can't be better, but a keyboard is always a compromise. You're using a system that was never designed for first-person shooters, or indeed any rapid interface system. Now, the advantage, of course, where the keyboard falls down is that the mouse is brilliant. It is much quicker to get on target, and I think anyone who plays cross-platform first-person shooters will know this. It's much quicker to get on target with the mouse, generally speaking, and it's much easier to control recoil as well, which gives you a huge advantage. So where you lose a lot on the keyboard, you gain something in the mouse, which I think overall probably balances out. If everything else was equal and this had good quality integrated controller support, which would I use? I'd use a controller because I think they're more intuitive, and most games that are made for controller have better controls. But as it stands, do I think the controls are right? Yeah, I agree with Pal. They are no worse. I play Arma and I play DCS, Digital Combat Simulator, which has, I think, something like 500 controls per plane, and they're different for every plane. So I'm kind of used to having to learn a lot of controls. So I think for what it is, it's all right, yeah.
We then decided to talk about things we'd like to see in the future. Of course, being an early access, there's a lot of things that are still to come, and there's some things that's probably already been fixed as you're watching this video. That being said, we had some ideas of what we wanted. Some were a bit more realistic than others.
I've been trying to think of what I want to see, but I honestly don't know. I'm kind of interested to see just where this game goes and let it sort of flow that way. I can't think of a thing now that if it came up in the next patch or the DLC or whatever, I'd look back and go, oh my god, I can't believe this is out now. I can't believe I used to play this game without this feature. So I'm really setting a bad example because I don't honestly know. But I think the way that this game is developing, what needs to happen will happen, and I think that it's going in the sort of right direction. So I'm sorry I don't have a definitive answer for you.
I'll tell you what, you've probably just made the developers really happy with that.
I hope so. Cheers.
Keep doing what you're doing.
Let me put more than one attachment on my weapon. Now,
Jesus Christ.
the game we're playing, you play this game against AI. You're not playing against enemy people. So balance is not really as much of an issue. Let me put a suppressor and a torch, or let me put a torch and a laser, and let me have the option of flicking between the two of them, because it's what real life SWAT do. They'll have a laser on the top, or they're visible, and an IR. They'll have a torch on the side. Let me do that. Don't make me pick between one or the other, because it does get, like, some maps you need a torch, like just hands down you need a torch, and then you'll go into another section of the map where actually turning the torch off and having your NVGs is going to be far more useful. And then I imagine in the future there'll be sections where a torch and NVGs are useless, but it's bright sunshine, so actually then a visible red laser is going to be far more important. So against enemy AI, balance doesn't matter, so let me have more than one on there.
Yeah, I think I probably just reiterate what I said earlier. Like, I think the game's good. I think the game's very good, actually. I think it has the potential to be exceptional. Although, like a lot of games, you do sometimes worry that it will end up in the alpha stage forever. So at the moment, the maps are very... It kind of comes back to what I was saying earlier. The maps are very standalone. Like, I feel like I'm going to shoot/arrest people, is what I feel like when I start a map. I don't feel like, we've got some intel that this place is, a drug haven, and, this guy's come and given us the lowdown that actually they don't keep the door around the back locked, and, there's a tunnel system. And then you go in, and the house, or the areas feel kind of lived in, to an extent, but they kind of feel like they're almost set up for you to go and raid them. Like, everyone's already standing there with their weapon drawn, ready. They've already put barricades or locks or booby traps on the door. So it doesn't feel very authentic, I think is the right word. And I think this comes back to the lack of planning stage as well. One thing that I think is missing, and I think everyone would probably agree with this, is the planning stage.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that makes it quite difficult. It feels like a planning stage would be an easy thing to implement. Like, all you need is a map and a game version of MS Paint where people can just draw on the map. Another game we played, Door Kickers, which is a top-down tactical shooter, has a live... So as you're playing, you can draw plans on the map that everyone else can see, and then they disappear after a while, so you can kind of show other people what you want to do. I would even be cool if the planning stage has a timer on it and go, this is a hot call, we're in the back of the van, this is the drawing we've got, you've got 1 minute to plan your entry. And that'll make you go, okay, this is a fast map, okay, we've got to be on our feet, we've got to get going. And it just gets you in the right zone. I think it lacks that at the moment. It doesn't feel like there's a background story to any of it. And again, I've got a lot of time for the developers. I'm not a game producer, and what they've done so far is brilliant. But I do kind of feel like I kind of just flip between the maps without any like emotional connection to any of them.
Mine is purely lazy, as someone who's dubbed themselves the YouTuber amongst this group. A replay, save, or editor, something in game. It for this, it's not going to be on the high end of their priority list, because it's single player. It's meant to be. It's not something that people are going to want to turn into esports level. If I can't have that, I'll take some more destruction. Kind of going into what Siege started with, and then kind of back on. I'd like the idea of, say if an enemy we'll use Krakow as an example, when you got a tweaker on the other side of a door and they just burst through a wall with a Tech 9. I'd love to see that happen. Proper like bullet holes turning up and light sources coming through. That would definitely add to the immersion of it. I don't know if that's on the cards. I think it'd be cool to see. We then went on to the touchy subject of multiplayer. A while ago, Ready or Not had a closed multiplayer event that wasn't exactly well received by the community. We weren't really asking for a competitive multiplayer experience, and what we saw was ropey, to say the best. However, maybe our opinions had changed. So, Did we think Ready or Not needs a multiplayer mode? No.
No.
Well, at least that was easy to figure out. Anyway, on to the next topic. We then discussed the weapons available. Given that this is meant to be a more authentic first-person shooter rather than a Call of Duty or a Battlefield, the selection is going to be quite limited. That being said, what did we think of what's available right now? At the minute, I think the selection's really good, it's really strong. I think the level of non-lethal is surprisingly well-rounded even as. Especially the beanbag shotgun, the pepper ball launcher, which was always funny in SWAT 4, going up against diamond heisters with M16s who are just there with this paintball gun looking thing going, please stop. I think the one thing that I've noticed though is that all the ARs, the long guns, they feel and sound exactly the same. And this is probably a case where realism teaches you something, that they're not all going to be like COD, where everything has its own feel and its own recoil or, even rapport. They're going to sound genuinely the same, and unless you can pick up specific pitches, you're not going to notice anything. I find myself leaning more towards the SMGs. I think the recoil control's a lot easier. At the minute, we only have 3 SMGs, which I think is a bit of a shame. I would like to see more. Pistols, I think, are pretty well rounded. I think it's hilarious how you can use a revolver in modern day police shooter. Just pretend we're a Texas SWAT unit as well. But yeah, I think what we've got is really good. I'd like to see some more SMGs, but no real complaints.
Yeah, I tend to agree, actually. I actually think this is a case where less is more. I actually don't think adding lots of extra weapons adds anything to the game, to be perfectly honest. I think people like Call of Duty and games that are similar, and don't get me wrong, I like Call of Duty. They've kind of made us feel that every gun that is available should be available to us, even if they're the same. Because cosmetics and things like that are important in Call of Duty. They're not here. There's a reason that every police force in the world uses a variation on about the same 4 rifles. It's either an M4, a G36, or something similar. And there's a good reason for that, because there's rifles that are good for police work and have been proven time and time again, and there's every other rifle in the world. So I think less is more. I would focus, if I was the developers, more on making the ones you have feel unique and meaningful. So the choice between them, actually, I basically choose the rifle I want based on the one that looks fun for that particular engagement, and not much more, because I don't really feel they feel very different other than that. The difference between shotgun, SMG and rifle is pretty big, in fact very big, and probably correctly so, but after that I don't really notice any difference at all. Similar to Vaughan, I tend to think the SMGs strike the right balance in almost every situation, and that doesn't feel like that should be the case, because if that was the case, everyone would still be using MP5s, and they're not. It does feel like body armor doesn't do anything. I don't know if that's just me. I don't know if there's any technical information on that, but it doesn't seem to matter who I shoot. They either randomly die after 1 bullet, or I've got to light them up. I don't know. But yeah, that's my thing.
I want an LMG. I want an M249 saw. I want to sit outside some fucking crack den and I want to light that place up. Use the entire fucking drum.
What are we, like Mexican or Brazilian special forces? Right.
I'm kidding. What you guys have said is absolutely right. The weapons you've got are already really good. I don't think you need to add any more. Maybe something like distinctions between with the AR rifles, ARs, with the assault rifles. You've got they all look kind of similar. I'm not like as much of a weapons nerd, a weapons geek, and to me it's kind of like I can see some of the differences between them, but most of them kind of look the same. So I'm not sure why I would pick any of these over something unique like a G36. It seems like you've got 3 or 4 rifles that feel and look exactly the same. I don't know why I'd pick them. Maybe some obvious differences, like if one of them is clearly supposed to be for long range, then it's like, okay, well, this is your long range rifle and you have your big scope as default to identify it that way, because they all just kind of feel similar. I feel like shotguns could do with a bit more, because the shotguns at the moment are just, you've got 2 that are very similar, and then you've got your beanbag shotgun. And I'm like, well, why would I pick a shotgun when I could just have an SMG? I feel like there's circumstances where the shotgun could be good, but I don't feel like there's enough reason for me to choose it over something that I know is going to work. I think as well, I think a game like this benefits more from having, like we've said, less weapons but more gadgets. I think that the gadgets are really sort of the bit that actually makes you makes a difference. You know, at the moment, most of us carry door wedges and flashbangs. There's not enough. I don't feel like there's enough diversity in the gadget pool to justify choosing anything else. It just feels like you may as well take those because everything else is either very, very similar or is not worth taking at all.
So, I mean, they've already raised some good points. I think the developers have already said that all of the assault rifles perform identically. They've just got different skins on them, I think. Now, whether they're planning on differentiating them in the future or not, I'm not sure. It's good and bad in some respects, because I think the developers did say that they didn't want to make weapons different just for the sake of it. They wanted, you know, the guns don't make this game, because at the end of the day you are supposed to make people surrender. But I still think it would be nice to have a little bit more differentiation between them. And I would like to see them go a lot further and do a proper weapon customization. So I would like things like different ammunition types. So give me the option for armor-piercing rounds if I know I'm going up against people with body armor. But give me the option for subsonic rounds if on, say, the hostage game, where you want to be really quiet, give me the option for subsonic rounds with a suppressor. They'll do less damage, they have less range, but they're far quieter. I think that would be really good. And again, Modern Warfare 2019, with their weapon customization, where you could change barrels, stocks, magazine types, etc., something like that, I think would be phenomenal, because it would be brilliant to be able to change the barrel length. You know, so make the weapon shorter, but as a trade-off on your ballistics. I think that would be really, really, really cool to go into. I think they're probably about where they need to be for assault rifles. It would be nice to see a few more SMGs. MP7 springs to mind. That one's incredibly popular. Maybe the P90, that again is quite popular. Both of them fire armor-piercing rounds in the real world. Shotguns, again, I'm not really sure what other shotguns you can add, but give me different ammunition types. Let me take a slug, or let me take flechette rounds or something. So give me a little bit more variety on that, because at the end of the day, if you're trying to be a realistic military simulator, then go for the nerd stuff. Give me the option for different ballistics, because at the end of the day, that's what you have access to.
The discussion then moved over to how we feel that Void Interactive, the game's developers, are handling launching an early access title. Now, a lot of the Void Interactive team are former developers behind SWAT 4. So of course this feels more like a spiritual successor and kind of like a Back 4 Blood to Left 4 Dead. Early access is quite often a coin flip at the minute. So how do we feel that Void Interactive are doing?
No, I think Void are doing really good. They're communicating with their customers, they're communicating with their fan base, they're pushing out content on a relatively regular scale, they're explaining what they're doing and what they're changing and what they're adding, and they're listening to people's ideas, they're interacting with the community, and they're giving people what they want. You know, people have paid money for a game which they understood was in early access, and the developers are going, okay, well, we're going to keep delivering on this, we're going to keep improving it, we're going to keep adding things. I think they're doing really well, and they're not just bowing to social pressure, and you know, they're thinking of, they either were or they still are, they're adding like a school shooting level, which I know is very close to the bone for a lot of people, but at the same time, if you're going for a realistic military simulator game, you know, it is part and parcel. You know, SWAT deal with those type of things. Now, you know, whether or not that's morally right to put in a game is a separate issue. But I think that the developer team are doing really good, and I think other developer teams in the world would do well to to actually take on board some of the lessons that have come from this, and not just ghost the community with their brutal expectations.
Well, I think what's great about Void Interactive is primarily the communication. It's the transparency as well. I think those are two very different things, because you could say a lot to your community and not be open with them. You can bullshit a lot. I think what really impresses me about Void is that they're willing to admit that there's a mistake. I'll take the multiplayer as an example. They went away after that got rightfully slammed by the community and the press. They went back and said, okay, we know what we have to do now. We have to focus on the single player and the co-op. We have to, our next, you know, introduction to the player base has to be something much better. I think the last time I saw a dev team turn around something that catastrophic was Hello Games and No Man's Sky, which, if you think about where it was when it started to where it is now, it's a whole new game. And I think Void are pretty much on that trajectory. I also had to laugh. I think it was you, Rowan, that pointed out that they didn't want to give a roadmap because they knew people would hold them to that. It's that level of honesty and knowledge about what a player base can be like. I think they're probably in the best place. And it is something about indie developers. They just get this so much better than mainstream.
So I've been not active on the Reddit, but I've been scanning through it quite often, and not every other post, but you see the devs quite often in the posts, in the comments, putting up something or saying something, so you can tell they're active within the community for a start. Long story short, they're doing really well. Keep doing what you're doing, because you're doing everything right. You're doing everything better than the other companies, the other bigger companies. You're all good in my books. Keep going. I was going to say that it's refreshing to see a game company embrace the mods rather than trying to shut them down. You see quite a lot of big game companies go like, no, we don't want mods. Like Bethesda was a big opponent to this, where they were like, no, we don't want mods. What we want you to do is we want you to pay these guys to do the thing that they were doing for free. But these guys they seem to be a little bit more relaxed about mods, and they're like, yeah, go for it. If you want this guy that, like, there's a Russian, there's one I saw on the subreddit earlier about somebody who's, they've decked out their guy to look like one of the sort of Russian Spetsnaz type of thing. I say, yeah, go for it. That's really cool.
Probably not that popular right now.
No, but like the guy, there was a guy who made, he either took voice lines from SWAT 4 or he made new voice lines. And from what I could tell, the devs were like got in touch with him, and they tried to sort of like, they said, if you want to make those available, we'll purchase them from you and then add them into the game. And that seems, it's nice and refreshing to see that they're embracing the mod community, because the mods only enhance the game.
And actually, we've seen through history that games with big modding support last and last and last. Yeah, not much to add, really. I think they're doing a good job. I indeed did see the comment where they said, we're not going to release a roadmap because we'll just disappoint people if we can't keep up with it. I do think there's a problem with toxic game communities at the moment. I think there's a big one, actually. And I don't think it's doing us a good service. Conversely, game developers are increasingly promising things that they're not either not able or not willing to give, which is not all their fault. I think an awful lot of it comes from the finance departments. But nevertheless, I think there's a double-edged sword. As gamers, I think we've been burnt a few too many times with big releases over the last probably 24 months, and that has led, and as Pal said, I follow the Reddits not closely but fairly well. There is an increasing amount of game player toxicity, And I think the developers deal with that really well, and actually they try and be honest and open and fair and reasonable about what they can accomplish with a small team in a small amount of time for a game that wasn't all that expensive. So yeah, I think they're doing a really good job. I don't actually know how much I paid for this game, but
I think it was. I think we all went for the foundation level, which was 34. I want to say.
Yeah, we didn't get the supporter
the big
edition.
one. I'll tell you what.
Yeah,
I meant
30 odd.
I meant to mention this in my bit, but I'll throw it in here. When you compare how mainstream and the indies do, the guys, I really wish I remember their names again. Door Kickers devs. How much feedback did they give us? And like where you could, they gave out their email where you could contact them directly. Ollie had that where he contacted.
I did.
Yeah.
The guy emailed me back.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I sent him an email saying, why don't you have the maximum number of players that can play on this map? He was like, good idea, we'll add that. And about 6 weeks later, it was on the game.
That level of direct communication with the devs is something that we're not used to in the mainstream.
Finally, we wanted to talk about how we feel Ready or Not in its current state is matching up to SWAT 4. Again, early access, not fully released, means we're not going to get a full picture. In some regards, we think bits of it are already well ahead of SWAT 4, but there is some things it could improve on. Let's see what we had to say.
Yes, it has the potential to get there. If we compare like for like, then I think it's slightly better. And I think part of that is just it's made on more modern technology. They've been able to do more with it. I think it does an excellent job of trying to encompass the SWAT team. I think it's still got a bit of ways to go, but it's definitely the groundwork seems solid for them to build on it and take it places. And I think it also benefits in that there's nothing really that compares to this on the market right now. If you want a fast twitch shooter, you're spoiled for choice. If you want a racing game, you're spoiled for choice. If you want a strategy game, you're spoiled for choice. If you want hardcore realistic military simulator, you really there's not that many, and there's not that many that are new. The ones that you were looking at, Arma 3, I don't even know how long that's been out, but it's been out for quite a long time now. And again, that doesn't do what this game does. That does open, full-scale military engagements. It doesn't really do SWAT stuff. It doesn't do small scale. So I think in that respect, they've found a niche in the market, and they're going for it, and I think that's really good. So yeah, like for like compared to SWAT 4, it's definitely there or thereabouts, and it's got solid groundwork and footing to really push it on. And I think that'll help with things like ray tracing. Make the most of the hardware that a lot of people have these days, and I think that'll really take it places.
If you had to put them side by side right now, SWAT 4's better in most regards, but SWAT 4 topped out with the Sketchkov Syndicate and never really got any better than that. And the thing that made it good was brilliant map design and great replayability. If you take any of the individual things from each game, Ready or Not basically does all of them better. The gunplay is better, the animations for the weapons are better. Like the SWAT weapons, it was like the gun was like stuck on your screen. Like it didn't even look like the gun was pointing where your bullets went, which is really weird. The graphics obviously were of their time, but they were pretty bad, even for their time. So if you took everything like for like, I think Ready or Not's doing everything better. There's quite a lot that it's missing that needs to bring up to SWAT 4 level, and I think mostly that's planning, storyline, and just making the game a bit more replayable, which I think we've played 19 hours at the moment, and I feel like as it currently stands, there's not much more. But I think that can be changed, and I think they'll do a good job. Do I think this will get as good as SWAT 4? Yeah, actually, if they keep going in the direction they are, at the current speed they're releasing stuff, I think by the end of this year, it'll be as good as SWAT 4. At the current speed of releases. Whether they can keep that up or not, I don't know. I honestly don't. Yeah, I think it's got a lot of life in it, and I think it could turn out to be a brilliant game. SWAT 4 still has a big online community, and it's 10 years old now. Sketch Skins came out in 2012, I think.
Where I think SWAT 4 excels above Ready or Not, because I think in terms of gameplay, Ready or Not is already better. I think it's smoother. I think it controls better. I think, although we have some weird quirks of movement and weapon handling already, I still think it's more realistic and it's a better challenge than SWAT 4 was. Where SWAT 4 is always going to be better until we get the full game is the campaign. The campaign, and I mentioned it before when it came to the levels, I would love to see some more atmospheric and more levels where there's more of a story behind it. I think Rowan's right when he says at the rate they're releasing stuff, we're going to get there pretty soon. My only fear, and it's the same one that's kind of befallen what was meant to be this game's competitor, which is 0 Hour, because not only have they focused more on the PvP side, which we all agree PvP is not going to help this thing at all. So that's why I don't want to see PvP in this. I think the levels we've got, there's so much potential to make stories out of each of them. Even the same level on multiple different conditions. I think you could make a very different story from Crack House Barricaded to Crack House Raid. Like, there's even hints of it already, like that the little girl that's in the room that's having a medical episode, I think is the most polite way of putting it. There could be a whole story about how we're specifically there to save her, which they don't capitalize on just yet. I'm pretty sure they will. I have full confidence that they're gonna, because fan favorite levels like Fairfax Residence are what kept SWAT 4 in people's minds. I think where we are, gameplay wise, it's already better. Just overall, the packet, the campaign and the overall presentation has a bit of a way to go. So if you guys are hearing this, you've made it through the whole video, and I cannot thank you enough for your patience. And even if you've just skipped to the end, fair enough. I do not blame you whatsoever. All I have to say is it was a lot of fun recording this, getting everybody together and hearing their thoughts. We don't get a chance to do this very often, and it was really good to hear how we all felt about the game. We might do this in the future when Ready or Not is in a more complete state, or if we just have another game we want to talk about. Thanks very much for watching, and have a great day.